For those of you who I don't know, my name is Pat DeLuca, and I will be taking you through the What's New in DP2 version 23 today. If you are new to DP2 or you've long time been involved with DP2, I hope you find today's session helpful and informative. And I do want to say that I wish I could pick up the phone and talk to every one of you and say, I hope you're well, I hope your family's well. We really do miss being able to reach out and talk to you and see you face to face as we've done many times in the past. So with that, this is DP2 version 23.1, and I'm going to just kind of quick go over the agenda. I've got a quick little poll. Then I'm going to talk very briefly about Kodak Professional Connect, which is a place that we've spent quite a bit of time and energy on in the last few months, and Kathy will be doing a presentation specific to Connect next Tuesday on July 12th, and I'll revisit that. I'm going to do a kind of overview of all of the enhancements, and some of them there's not much to show. You'll see I've got a list, and there's not going to be a whole lot to show. But there's a couple of places that I am going to focus some attention. One is some enhancements that we've made to the Node Selector, and others are a new feature that is a new type of export. And hopefully, definitely, right? I'm going to leave time for Q&A. And even if this kind of pushes out a little bit, you know that I'll be here in order to answer any questions that you might have. There we go. So Kodak Professional Connect, as I said, Kathy is going to be doing a micro-learning or kind of a what's new on Tuesday, July 12th at 2 p.m. I think you should have all gotten invitations. And I would encourage you, even if you're not sure that you're interested in going, that you maybe just take that little bit of time to familiarize yourself with what it is. She's going to be talking about how the integration between Kodak Professional Connect and DP2 23.1 will allow the lab to integrate with that cloud catalog that's at the heart of that. She's going to talk about how that's going to enable multiple partnership opportunities with online gallery vendors, which is really the whole purpose, kind of how that works. Talk a little bit of the how and what about extending your reach and connecting, more consumers to professional output. So again, I think that it'd be worth the 45 minutes to an hour. If you haven't already heard of it, I know we've been talking about it for a little while, but we have done some integration for 23.1 that I think is definitely worth a listen and, some questions. The sales team is up to speed, and so they're also, of course, your first and best resource for getting connected and getting information about that. So these are some of the higher level enhancements, and these are the ones that it's not really anything for me to show. But I do want to kind of just give you a sense of some of the things that are happening. There's a whole list. There's on the service desk, we've posted, if you haven't gotten it any other way, the what's new and the cumulative changes for 23.1. So all the bug fixes will be in there, and all of the other smaller things that I'm not going to take any time to talk about today. Just a couple of things I wanted to mention, right? We've added a load special effects.txt to the DP2 scripts and macros, which is going to make it so that you don't have to use that special effects macro we've had in the past, in my macros. We've extended the range for saturation so that the lab can change it in the printer queue from -100 to 100. And this will affect the saturation in the images, the raw images, and the image adjustments tables. So it just gives you a little bit more latitude and ability to make changes there that you might need to. We're going to age out session logs for those labs that don't currently shut anything down. So generally what we've done in the past is, session logs get deleted when you shut things off. Well, there are labs that run for weeks at a time, and that's not happening. It's building up a lot of crud in your hard drive. So those will automatically age out regardless of whether or not you shut down. They've made some improvements to prevent worker status paints from consuming memory. Significantly faster opening and closing of grid views. I know for some labs, if you've got huge amounts of data in a table, sometimes that's slowed you down a little bit. So they've made, some enhancements that are going to kind of help you do that. There is a new copy from server button on the programmer's assistant, and if there are questions about that, I think Tom Aplin is going to join us at some point, and if not, then I can take those questions and we can get back to you. The render effects now supports macros for looking up attributes in the render list, which again is just high level, few of the things that we have going for version 23.1. So these are a couple of features that I'm going to talk about. Really from here, I'm going to kind of go into DP2 and spend the bulk of our time inside of DP2. I'm not going to spend too much time floating around out here. But I did want to mention some Composite Job Generator enhancements that I'm not going to take the time to show you in DP2 for those of you who do Composite Job Generator work, use composites. Now in the subject info data table, whoops, let me just go back to that. In the subject info data table, there's a Composite Job Generator button. So if you're working inside the subject info data table, you can now just open the Composite Job Generator right from there. And that was a lab request, and I'm glad to see it. Another enhancement in the Composite Job Generator is the ability to copy the attributes from one job setup to another. So you can copy it from one, and there's a long, all of your setups will be in there. And then kind of overwrite what you have, or if you started a new one, you can just simply borrow those from another. The other one is previous versions, the merge order items with subject packages wasn't saved in the job setup, and so now that's saved in part of the job setup. And with that, that's really kind of all my PowerPoint. The rest of the time I want to spend talking about the Node Selector and what we're calling the Export After Render Helper. And I want to say, for those of you labs that are out there who have been looking for this type of a data export feature, I'm really glad to be able to talk about it today. So with that, I'm going to just escape. Let's see if it'll let me escape. There we go. We could have done that more gracefully, but what are you going to do? So on to DP2. So I'm going to start. I've got a couple of layouts open. I have a couple of jobs open. This is the Node Selector. I'm going to close it momentarily so that I can show you how I got there. For those of you who are not familiar, the Node Selector is a right-click menu item from Layout Helpers from Nodes. This Node Selector, let me get rid of my, there we go. The Node Selector is the first interface. I'm actually going to show you another one, but the Node Selector is the first interface that's being done in a different way in DP2, so that it allows us to do some things we haven't really been able to do before. It's allowing us to make it a little bit more interactive and a little more responsive, so things should, these types of interfaces now that work a little bit better. Especially if you're on smaller, like a laptop, which I am on today, by the way. So the Node Selector, which has existed for a little while, we introduced it actually last year, and we've made some incremental improvements, but we've pretty much changed the way it works. And I'm going to go through, and I'm going to try to keep real track of my time here because I want to have a bunch of time for the export feature. The Node Selector, and the way that it works is it's going to allow you to first, and this is something that we had before, where you can see all the nodes, and you can see in the new interface that we now have filters. And one of the things that Tom has included in this one is now when you click on those blue buttons or words inside the buttons, now there's an explanation of what it is and kind of how it works. And this is going to be true in kind of all of the interfaces that take this approach. So in this case, my filter is for both image and text nodes, but it could be just image nodes or just text nodes or name nodes, KPX, which is the acronym for Coder Professional Connect. countable nodes and so on. And this is, again, this is kind of the beginning of the process. These are the things that we thought of, or Tom has thought of, as might be interesting or might be something that you'd want to be looking at. We also have the ability to say not, right? So if I had image or text nodes and I go not, it's immediately responsive. I don't have to click anywhere else. These are not, it's kind of the opposite of what you have there, and I can just deselect it. So I can show specific information. So here in the selection information field, I can show, KPX node names. I could show node locations. I can show a specific keyword. And I'm just going to take a look. So here we can see if you had tons of, nodes in here, then it was much more complicated than what I'm showing you. You can see that not only is it going to show you, it's going to keep that information, but it's going to show you what the location of each one of those nodes is. So that, and you can change it. These are, I'm actually going to show you in another way. And you can see here where it's selection, I have it manually selected, but I could do all or none. Again, I have a lot of different options here. And so I'm going to encourage you to, when you upgrade to version 23.1, to work with this, because I think for layouts that are complicated and where you have multiple nodes on top of each other, this is really going to start to make that work a lot easier. So one of the other things, I'm going to go from node locations to a specific keyword. And in this case, how about, I look at, and it really, again, I'm just giving you an example. How about I look at auto crop? So I can see here what the cropping information is, and I actually can change it. I'm not going to change it on this layout. I have another one. I'm going to close this one, but I wanted to kind of go through some of what we have here. So as an example, if I were looking at this is a job. This is not a layout. This is a job, and you'll notice it's automatically, the node selector very quickly and easily moves to the next layout. So if I needed to crop, maybe I needed to crop this, and I'm just making this up, right? I'm not going to worry too much about, but I just want to show you kind of what's happening if I need to be able to, and I'm on node 10,000, so I'm on the child. And again, I'm just clicking elsewhere, and it's going to show you, it just shifted that child over incrementally. So if you have, in this case, it's a job, but if you had layouts where you really needed to start to tweak cropping and some other things, you can do it right from in here. And as I said, you've got a whole range. In this case, my keywords are specific to my image and text, but I could make it just to my text. I could make it to name nodes and so on. So you've really got a lot of capability there. So that's just kind of what's happening here. And again, I've got the same thing. I can do all kinds of different attributes that I can go after in order to be able to make my selections. The buttons across the top, we have one. I'm going to close this puppy. So we have buttons across the top, and I want to explain a little bit what you're seeing here. So here we have, for the first time, we have copy and paste. So I can copy the attributes of one node to the next node. The one thing that's not included in here is the actual text in a node, so that if I had image and text nodes, the text that was in the text node would not be copied. But we can ask for that if you want it. So keep that in mind. So this would allow you to copy the node attributes from one. And of course, the idea being, you could copy them. If I copy them here, I could then copy them. I could select a whole bunch of nodes and then paste those attributes to the other nodes. So we're really trying to kind of make that. And then if I don't like what happened, I can undo it. I actually had a macro in there, which is why. So I can go ahead and just kind of undo it as I need to. Just to kind of give you a sense of what's happening there. I'm going to go ahead and close that. No, I'm not going to save it. So here I've got another one. And in this case, I'm going to just kind of go through some of these other buttons just to give you a sense. I can, of course, delete a node from here. So if I didn't want a particular node, I could delete it. And I'm just hovering so I can show you that there's tooltips, there's all kinds of things. I can make a change to multiple nodes. I can duplicate a node. So if I want to take a node and duplicate it, I can do that. Save. This will refresh my window. If I want to open a layout in Notepad++, if you have it integrated, it'll go ahead and just open that up in Notepad++. So if you needed to do something within Notepad++, it's easily accessible to you. It'll also, just so that you can kind of do everything within the same interface, it's going to allow you to open the image node properties, right? Open the text node properties, re-render it. And then, of course, we've done a lot of work to make sure that this is well documented, that you have what you need right here, and Pete's done a great job of putting together the documentation for this. So that's a very high-level view of what's going on in the Node Selector. Oh, yes, I have a question. Can I show that again? I will show that again. So I brought up the Node Selector. I'm going to close it. I brought it up by right-clicking. This is part of the layout helpers. So we have calendars and composites, which we've had, right, and edit, but now this is nodes. And so the Node Selector comes up. Thank you for asking. Did I go too fast? So in here again, the Node Selector comes up and it's completely responsive to whatever is happening in that specific layout or job that you happen to have open, depending on what kinds of changes you need to make. So with that, I'm going to move on to the export after render feature. And there's a little bit of a chicken and an egg here, which comes first. So I'm going to start with the new feature, and then I'm going to backtrack to some of the groundwork, the setup work that you're going to need to do. Because what we've done is if you go to categories and go to export, we now have a new tab on export called Export After Render. And this, again, this interface was built using our new approach. So it's a lot more kind of user-friendly, follow the wizard sort of feel. And I have some setups in here. I'm going to go through the setups that I have in here. And if we have time, I can maybe create a second one. But there's a bunch of things that goes into making this sing. So I do want to talk a little bit about what this is. So this is our ability to use a product with a order complete script that will allow you to run all those images and then also export a data file in the right format to the right folder, all of those things. So, and I know this is something that folks have been asking for a while, and there's a couple of you I hope are cheering, because we worked hard to kind of make this what you had asked, the kind of vision that you had given us for it, or our interpretation of that vision. So the first thing I'm going to do is choose it. And now I'm on the, you'll notice a couple of things, the tabs across the top. I actually want to pause 1 second and show you this. So Tom did a great job of telling you how it works and what it is. And he's got all of the different tabs explained briefly here to kind of give you a sense of what's happening and what you're going to need to think about as you plan to be able to do this work. And that's right up front. Obviously, you saw when it comes up, it comes to choose setup. It comes up to choose setup, but that how it works is right there. So when you're first getting, accustomed to it, it'll be right there on the left, and you can just hop right to it. So just this very first choose setup, if I had no setups, there would be nothing here, right? I happen to have a setup chosen called Admin Plus, and you'll notice by category, and again, we've got that same thing, right? Those blue labels provide, some insight into what's happening there and description, so just give you a sense of what's going on. I would take a few minutes the first time you're in here to read them. I found it really helpful. So this number 8 tells me the number of setups that are in categories. Once I select a specific category, like I have admin CDs, then you'll see there's 4 setups for my admin categories. What I'm going to do here is, if I had a brand new setup, it would be blank and I'd have to type as I go along, but I'm going to actually edit this existing setup. The description that you see here, this was my way of organizing. You guys, the descriptions and how you want to organize is completely and totally up to you. But I started a little spreadsheet, right? You've probably all seen these, or you have them, right? Or you have that wonderful sheet that H&H did. So I just had, a little bit of a spreadsheet for me. So as I was working, it was easy to get my hands on. In the description for me, I put the size, the size of the image size on it. So I knew, what what kind of attributes I was dealing with. But again, the description can be used for anything that you need it to be. So I'm going to select to edit this particular one. I will point out you could create a new one, duplicate a setup, and I did that when I was creating multiple setups. You can view the setup data, which takes you to the table, but I'm going to edit it, and you'll see it just moves me to the edit setup parameters, which is the next tab. I could have also used, we have previous and next buttons down here on the right. So there was a lot of attention paid here to being able to kind of help the user through the process, in the easiest way possible. So I'll show you a little bit about what's happening here. You can see it stays labeled in my category. So we have 3 different types of exports that you can do using this export after render. The first one is CSV, which is what I'm going to demonstrate. I could show you. I have XML and I have a custom one that I do want to show you. So those are the 3. And Tom, this is right. There's a lot of flexibility in the way this is done. We tried to think of as many variations as we could, and I'm sure you guys are going to think of 100 more. But the way that he's designed it, it should allow you to take advantage of that 100 more. So here's where the description came from. And if I had been creating a new setup, I would have been typing all of this in, right? This would have been blank and I would have moved. So header and trailer would be appropriate if I were, say, doing an XML, but in the case of a CSV, I don't need it. So which is true for some of this other information, which I'm not going to change. Down here in the directory, this is like my favorite moment in this whole thing, right? And again, same thing, those blue labels all provide all kinds of explanations so that you know kind of what you're doing. But you'll notice in here that it says no directory specified. The data file will be placed in the same folder as the first rendered image. So that can be really important, right? And depending on what it is you need to do and how you're doing it, you may want it in the folder with the images. You may want it somewhere else, in which case you could browse out, right? Or you could use a macro, or you could do all kinds of things, right? So if you were select append, all of these. Now, if you were to use a macro like this one, not the order ID, right? You could put the order ID in there and then it would be the order ID. If you were to use any order field, you'd of course have to, know what field that data is in. And I actually have a couple where I did do that. And then you'd have to get that in here, right? Because it's totally up to you, whatever you want to use. I'm just going to delete these out of here. And then the file name. So if you have a specific file name, you can rename it, but the same thing is true here, right? You have all of the access that you need to things, again, that we could think of. So this is the kind of basically parameters. And again, Tom's done a great job of getting the tooltips in there and getting the explanations. And I'll just remind everybody, you could view data, right? But I'm going to say, don't forget to save, right? It's really important as you go through an interface like this. So I'm going to use the next button to move on to specify fields, right? Remember, if this were the yearbook, PSPA yearbook, you would have been in that cross-reference table. But here we have this really easy way to do it. And that is, I can go for here's all my subject info data tables, here's orders and customers and images. I can take it from wherever I need it. And then once I'm in that table, and I'll just go to the subject info data table for this one. Let's see if I can find it real fast. There we go. So if I wanted to add something to this, I could do a couple of different things. I could double click on it, or I could use the arrow, right? But same thing. So, and you can see where it says up here, you can see where it says delete all. It tells me how many I have. I can add a blank one. If you wanted to write your own, right? Where is it coming from? And you had your own macro call, you could do that. So there's a lot of flexibility here and it's really fluid in terms, I think, anyway, in terms of how it works. So I'm going to say that again, and it's going to confirm. It's going to ask me, oh, and by the way, see, that goes away all by itself. I don't have to close it. After a second or two, it disappears all by itself, which of course, I love that kind of stuff. So again, I could simply click over here to create or to complete, but I'm going to use the previous and next buttons. Just, I suggest that you find a way that works for you and kind of stick to it, just for consistency's sake. I think that's helpful. So again, same thing. So this is, if I was just starting the process and just going through this for the first time, I would have selected new, and we would have provided this information for you. You'll notice right here's my setup. This is all tracks back to a new class called export data or exp data. And I, of course I can save, I can load from, I can go to, there's all kinds of things you could do here. And I'll show you the custom one. For this one, I don't really need to do anything else. But for a custom one, I might need to go back out into my system. There might be other things that because I might want to change the way that, the script was written so that it could do something special for me. So those are all things that you'll want to think about as you, depending on how creative you need to be. And it's going to confirm in green. Let me know I've done everything right. So now I'm going to go to next, which is modify product. And modify product is important because modify product is going to allow me to take the step which is going to allow my product to do what I need it to do. So there's a bunch of different ways to do it. I could enter the product ID up here, right, if I wanted to, but I'm going to actually go ahead and drag this in here. So if I drag, now, Tom, when I showed Tom and I were talking about this, he said, you don't have to drag it over here to the product preview box. You can just really drag it on the interface. But, I'm of a child of restriction, I guess, I don't know. So I dragged it into the little box. So immediately I get a preview. It shows me the product ID up here, right? And it shows me the script path, right? So that's where it is, and that's the default path. If I'm not changing what's going to happen, and I'm going to talk about the product in just a minute so that I can kind of give you a sense of how this goes full circle. If I'm not changing anything, then I can just leave it right there, and it's going to put that data in the folder, and everybody's going to be happy. But you might want to browse out if you want your data files saved somewhere else, or however you want to do it, or if you wanted to. And wait, let me backtrack and correct that. This is the script path. So by default, the script path is going to be in the scripts folder, in a folder called exp data order complete. If for some reason you don't want the script in that folder, you want to put it somewhere else, you would browse this, right? This is not the path for the data or for the images or anything else. This is just for that script that we're going to be using in order to make this work. And then again, any potential trigger or script data, anything else that you might. Now that I kind of have selected my layout and I know what I want to do, I have to select modify, which is actually going to add that information to the product because, and I'll say it again to reinforce it. What we're doing here is we're allowing the DP2, when the product is rendered, to then implement the order complete script. And if you think about it in the past, if you've ever used, we use order complete scripts in the print queue and the printers, right? Those type of scripts have always been specific to a print queue, so that everything that was being implemented through the print queue might be impacted by that. In this case, we have a very specific task that we want to have done as a function of the product. So it's a kind of an important distinction, and I'll show you in the product. I'm going to leave this up. I'm actually going to open the product so I can show you. This was a little tiny admin CD one. I took this off of one of those charts. But in the output to disk dialog box, we now have tabs. One is order complete and one is print complete. Print complete, we think is a little bit would be a little unusual from this point of view, but that script that is being implemented and that I just created for this layout, or implemented for this layout, that script is now, you can see it, that, of course I did my job and I saved it properly, is now appears in that order complete script window in the output to disk file, and that's how you know you've kind of done your job, just that you know. But there's a couple of other things that I did here inside the product that I want to talk about so that I could get exactly what I needed to get. And I'm going to show you the result of this. I'm not going to render things. I did a bunch of that yesterday. I didn't think we all needed to sit here and watch anything render. But I want to kind of show you, I did it a couple of different ways based on what I found, what kind of the examples I pulled out of this spreadsheet. So I had, different sizes right? I had different extensions. I didn't worry about too much for this demo, but I did make them different resolutions just so I could test it. But I did worry about the image name, right? I worried about the format, which I set up in my export. I worried about how the format of the data here, which I also set in my export. But I also thought a little bit about this, right? Some cases, a specific folder was requested sort or admin plus or admin. So I wanted to make sure that I understood and honored that. And the way that I did that was by writing this output file here, so that I put everything in the order output folder because it was easy for me. I put everything, this O is that macro for the order ID, or creating a folder with the order ID on it. And in this particular case, right, it was the naming needed to be the student ID. The file naming needed to be the student ID. And if you've never created this kind of an output spec, that's a conversation for probably a whole nother day. And if you're interested in it, shoot us a note or let me know, and we can, we can kind of look at that. I couldn't find any place where we had sort of documented this in video format. So, but this is an important piece of this process, is using the product to name the file and to put it in the right place. And then all of the work that we did here in the export after render, the export after render helper, all of that work then will allow everything to be automated and to continue to be automated. So I'm just going to bring up my folder, and of course I didn't have it open ahead of time. That would have been really good, right? So we got to go into our KPDB2 folder. Hold on. Okay, so what I did is I saved it in order output, which is kind of the default. Then this is my order, is my 23.1 what's new order. And inside of that, as I was working with this yesterday, I did a couple of different things, right? I tried it by batch, I tried it by name, I did a series of things just to kind of test it and to be able to show you. So this first one, that requested sort, right? So here's the 5 images that I ran, and here's the data. This is just a CSV. This is the data file that was generated, and this was image name and grade, teacher, last name, first name, student ID, and homeroom. So this is really the job that our export did for us, right, in kind of any format we wanted. But this, organizing where it went and how the images got there and where the data file was, a combination of that output spec that I created, as well as the the specification around the data file that I created in my export window. So that's kind of the gist of it. Now there's a couple of other things that I do want to just highlight for you. So I've got a couple of other setups, and I'm going to go back to my editing setup so I can specify different setups so I can show it to you. So I do have a custom and an XML, and I just briefly want to show you those and to give you a sense of kind of what's different as I go through these. And I can show you, I'm pretty sure that I saved those, the folders, but we'll take a look. I'll have to go in them. We'll just have to poke around a little bit. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to edit it. So in this case, I added a header and a trailer for XML, right? That's really all I had to do, except I needed to choose XML so that DP2 understood what to do. I left these the same though. No directory specified because I wanted it with the images. So that's something for you guys to think about in terms of how you would want to use something like this. And the file name, of course, is a .xml. Those are, but again, the same things are true here. If you can go through and select whatever it is that you need, just takes a little planning, because the interface itself is really, I think, easy to use. I really do. I think this is kind of a wonderful next step for us. So in specifying the fields, I'm using the buttons at the top this time. Same thing, there's no difference in this part of the process, right? But these were different because that's what was required for this particular one, which is a little different than the first one that I did. And then the order complete. Now, This one here, it doesn't look like there's a lot different, and there really isn't, other than that it's going to be XML. And then of course, you know, my product is already in here, and I had a different set of products for different things. So you can see really the only difference in an XML setup was if I wanted, you know, header and trailer information. If there was some other, you know, do I need something? Do I need to quote, right? Is it one or none or double? You know, is there data quote I can choose, right? This kind of thing. These are the other options that I have in terms of how that data is exported. So the last one that I want to show you is looking at the one that is custom, because there's a little bit of difference there in terms of, again, you have tremendous amount of capability there. There's all kinds of things. For those of you who have the programming skill set, I hope you're seeing the opportunity here to pretty much export as you need something exported, which was really, I thought was really powerful. So in this case, I chose sorry, I didn't hit the edit button. So here it is in custom, and you can see again, that's how I use the description. I did left, this is XML here, but again, this could be whatever you need it to be. So it could be a .txt. That's probably, if you're in here creating a custom export and you know what it is you want, you know, once you get, you know, what it is exactly that you want to export, you could just, these are totally editable this way, right? There's nothing stopping you from doing whatever it is that you need, so long as, and I would of course say if you wanted to go way out there in the weeds and it's not a text or an XML or something known file format, that you check in with us first, or try it yourself and see what happens. So in a case like this, as I move on to next and specify the fields, there's nothing different here, right? The fields are going to be whatever, wherever from inside of DP2 that you're getting that data. But when you look at the custom text and you go new, I'm going to confirm that just so I can show you. So when you look, now we're exposing you to all of that information, so that if there's something that you need to overwrite, or there's something that you want to do in a very specific way, you have access here and you can do it here, and you can see here you can load from and shortcuts. You got all of this you know, capability right here in that export window. And it would be the same thing once you've settled on what it is you have here, then you're going to be able to go ahead and modify your product, and it will sit right inside the product. And I do want to, before I want to wrap up a little bit so that I can give you opportunity to ask any questions. And of course, I think I promised that this would be 45 minutes in my original note. So I'm just going to view this as text, because I do want to kind of just give you a sense of where that stuff, right here is, that saved name is here, right? It doesn't look all that different. Here's my order complete script, right, that I showed you in that order output. And you can of course edit it and save it here. But again, if you've got the product open, you want to be a little careful about that. That's just a little bit of a caveat. So with that, those are the two kind of pieces that have been added and enhanced in 23.1. And of course, it gives us an opportunity to show you a little bit about some of the new ways that we're working, and some of the things that we're thinking about. You know, we've all spent a little time thinking about how to make things better and how to make things wonderful for you. So with that, I'm going to pause. I'm going to open up this, and I'm going to see if you have a question. You can either raise your hand and I can open the mic, or I can, you know, you can put it in the questions panel. Does the export after render replace aspect of the workers? I want to say no, and then I'm going to qualify that a little bit. So I want to say no, but. And the reason I'm saying no, but is because I don't really know how you're using your workers, right? So if you're using workers to do a specific type of export, maybe. So this is a question where I'd want to have you tell me what you're doing with your, and if you're willing, then I will go ahead and open up your, just raise your hand if you want to give me a little bit more information there. Oh, you do. So are you okay if I unmute you? All right.
I got you, Pat.
Okay.
Right now, we're looking into using it for MMS messages. Like if somebody orders a digital download, it would send them a text message of the image.
So the short answer is no, and then I'm going to think that for a second. So if you were, so no. And Tom, I'll open it up. Tom, raise your hand if you're going to add to what I'm about to say. So I'm going to say no because this export and this this script, this specific export script in the product, right, the order complete script is going to do a very specific thing, which is going to be to create a data table in addition to the images that you're generating. So I know what you're doing. We did add the ability to do that out of the subject info data table. Are you? we have the ability to do that right out of the subject info data table. So if that's not working for some reason, then she should knock on the door of service, for the service group, because I think that would be I'm trying to imagine. Oh, Tom says, Tom, I'm going to unmute Tom.
I do have one other really easy question in the meantime.
Yeah.
In the Node Selector, do we have the ability to adjust the order of the layers? Like, for example, the front and the back?
Yes, that was in, let me just bring it up. That was actually in the original one. Of course, I picked one with them. Let me just open one that's got a bunch of, yeah, it's still the same, the ability to just take a little gray guy and change it. Yep.
Got it.
Yep. Okay. So, Tom, can you speak now? Apparently not. Oh, audio trouble. Okay. So, Andrew, if Tom isn't able to talk to us.
Yeah, I mean, we just started working on the MMS. I think we have it pretty much set. We were going to start testing sometime this week. So if we have it, we'll just let you know.
Yeah, no, but this is, I don't know as I would take this. I think you're better off doing it because you're using events, right?
Yeah. So this would be more for just yearbook CDs and PSPAs and things like that.
Right. This just gives you the ability to, really kind of make that whole piece sing. Right before, PSPA was one format, and we didn't have any capability to give you some freedom there. And this is as much freedom as we could give you.
And now you can do it by product, right?
Correct. That's the key, right? Because then you can put that output spec in the product, right? That's the key, is the ability to, in the product, put this, get this output spec exactly the way you want it, right? And then, have that order complete so that when the product is rendered, the data is automatically created during the process.
All right, makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Tom, were you able to, let's see. Tom, do we have you back yet?
I want to ask her for any complications with the upgrade. How many people have upgraded? Yeah.
Maybe not. All right, Andrew, I think I need to. Okay. All right, I'm not exactly sure, but what we'll do is we'll record it, and so what we'll do is when Tom and I can talk about it afterwards, and then we can get back to you. So, Greg, so how would we generate one of these exports when we need to combine images between two orders, such as the original shoot and the retake shoot? So, Greg, here's how I'm going to answer that question. And do you mind if I put you on, if I unmute you, Greg? How's that?
That's better.
But, okay. I had to figure out which one. So, I totally understand what you're asking, right? And in my mind, I'm thinking about how you might be able to do that, right? Because they're all going to be in the same subject info data table, right? Because if you're doing, right? So if they're all in the same subject order data table, then we've given you all of, you're just the thing that you're going to have to.
They're actually not in the same table per se, like in the PSPA yearbook tool. You have the ability to select multiple orders so long as they're using the same table, and then it'll simply combine them. And you then have the ability to use what's the forgetting my terminology here.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. So the way that we'd have to do it, let me think about that for a second. And I have not tried this. It's one of the reasons why Okay. I haven't tried it. It's one of the reasons why I'm hesitating. But in my mind, if you're running all of those, so when you run those, so this works a little differently because we're at the product level, right? Oh, so because we're at the product level, we're implementing from the order item. So if you were running the order items together, right, that would work. But we'd have to figure out how to run the order items together. I mean, I could be way off base, but I don't think I am. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, it's a really good question, and it's just a scenario that I didn't think to try, and I'm sorry now that I didn't. I should have, because I do have reorders on the order that I'm working with, right? Because what you'd have to be able to do is run the order items, and you can do that. I don't know that you're set up to do that, so we'd have to play with that some. But if you were running all the order items together, and you were using an output spec, right? That told the order that specified where they had to be and where everything was going, it would be dependent on how you had the product set up.
Right, but
Right?
wouldn't we then have to be running the products from two separate jobs at the same time?
I don't know. I'm going to have to play with that. It seems
So
like we could do that. Oh, very good. You did. Yes.
do I sound okay or not?
You do. Great. Thank you.
Okay. So I didn't get to hear everything, except I thought I was hearing a question about what happens if the images are on different orders.
That's the question where, yes, it's
And
Greg.
hi, Greg. And you might be past this part already, but if those orders were tied together with a chute, so that they were all represented the same chute and the data was coming from the same chute description or subject info table, you know, then it would just work naturally. But I missed what came afterwards, so I don't know if that's your case or not.
Greg?
Yeah, we typically don't tie things together with chutes, but we might have to.
Yeah, the rest of DP2 kind of depends on that too. If you want us to be able to find the kid's name, and it's 3 different orders, if they're not tied together, we wouldn't be able to find the kid's name.
So
this would be no different than the rest of it.
Yeah, so let me pause just for a second. So Greg, you said earlier that they were tied together. How are they tied together if they're not tied together in the chute description?
Well, they're not necessarily tied together in DP2. They're just kind of they're just related orders, let's say, and they're using the same subject info table.
Oh, so if they're all in the same subject info data table, can you run them out of?
They're not in the same. Let me rephrase. They're using the same table, but they're not in the same table.
Oh.
In other words, they're different orders in the same table structure, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that's exactly where chutes come in. All you have to do is go into the orders under the chute description ID, which is like maybe the 7th or 8th column over, and just put whatever the subject info order ID is in all 3 of those, or however many you have. That ties them together so that regardless of what order something's on, we can go find the subject info.
Right.
So that should work fine.
I recall I was playing with it at some point, but decided not to use it for some reason, and I'm sure that will come up once I start using it again.
Okay.
I know. You have, right, you have, somehow or another it's there. I'm trying to remember, I think we might have had that conversation before.
I feel like we probably did.
Yeah, I don't remember why you decided you didn't want to do it, but it'd be a great idea given that I was very excited for you guys when we started to work on this. I got to tell you, Greg. Right. All right.
I think most people in that situation, like with retake day and other stuff like that, are using chutes. So if there is a reason you can't use it, it would be interesting to hear, because it might be something we can help you work around or even make a change to accommodate.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I'll get back into that, and I'll figure out what the stopping block was.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm looking to see, I realize that we're just a little bit before the top of the hour. I'm looking to see if anybody wants, raise your hand if you have another question. Oops, where was that question mark? Oh, that's you, Greg. Okay.
Oh,
Or
there
put the
was a question about sending a text message.
Yes, yep,
That's what I came on to answer originally.
yeah, oh, okay.
So what I like for that strategy is a different one than this. I like to queue an event, which is something you can do in a product now, and have the event use a remote worker to do the sending. The reason I like that is at the time we try to send it, it may not actually go. There might be internet problems, the other side might be down or whatever, but that can be set up to retry. So you can queue this thing up once and be assured that it'll eventually get out, as opposed to doing something at render time where, you know, the render engine will make one attempt to send it, but, you know, it's got to move on and start rendering other stuff. So it can't sit around and wait for the other side to come back up like a remote worker can. It can just sit in queue and try again later. Same thing for sending an email.
Yeah. Does that help, Andrew?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, all right, good. All right. So if there are no other questions, well, then I'll thank you for being here, and I'll thank all of you. It was really wonderful to be able to reach out to everybody today. Thank you so much for joining us, and I will clean up the recording and get it posted so that if you want to share it with anyone, or you want to revisit it later to kind of remind yourself of how these things worked, it'll be available to you. So again, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. You all take care of yourselves and be well. Thank you.